Why is that so hard, and what can you do to try to capture that in these games?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've tried to, really have talked about that a lot during the year. I think with different players in certain roles and different roles going through it for the first time, it can be all new and a new experience that will help them get better. I think if you look at the stat sheet, the first half numbers offensively, first half numbers defensively, and then the same thing in the second half. There's been a big disparity in those two areas. So I think the consistency of being able to play when we're playing at our best and working to do it for longer stretches, and something we've been trying, and I think our guys have gotten better. The one thing that was encouraging to see is I thought coming out of game one and going into game two, we did a better job in those areas, and we had longer stamina in those areas, and it's just got to be something we keep building on.
What can you do to get Vic going? I mean, he's a 5 for 26 in the series. Obviously, Russ needs somebody out there to.
I actually thought, in game one, tried to talk to Victor after, because I think Victor holds himself, to a high standard in terms of wanting to go out there and perform well. And he works really, really hard and focuses and concentrates on trying to play well. I think there are certain players, in my opinion, that they're one-dimensional, and when you're a one-dimensional player and that dimension's not working, it allows you just to totally focus on that one dimension, and that one dimension sometimes can actually become worse. Victor is a two-way player, and I didn't think has not shot the ball particularly well in the series, but, he's rebounded the ball well, he has defended well, and there's other things that he does. I think the one thing he needs to try to get even more into his game is even his passing. On drives, putting it on the floor, trying to attack the paint, making extra passes, trying to generate shots for other guys. Victor's not a one-dimensional player. He can do a lot of different things, and I think that taking his mindset and his focus off the ball, going in or out of the basket, and realizing I'm not going to allow myself to be defined by that, because there's just too many other things I can do out there to help this team. And I think for him, going in the playoffs for the first time and going through this for the first time and being in the position that we are as a team, this being his first, there's ways that he's got to find to impact the game when maybe his shots aren't falling, to be able to say, well, geez, Victor, has not maybe shot the ball particularly well, but wow, he's doing all these other things. And I think a perfect example of that is Andre Robertson. He's figured out ways to impact the game, and it's been 2 games in a row. He's at 18, he's had 12. Now, he made some threes in the first game, but this last game he was slashing and cutting to the basket. He got out in transition, he got some offensive rebounds. He's impacted the game, and obviously with his defense, he's impacted the game. And I think Victor, being this his first time, these are great learning and growing experiences for him.
Billy, was there ever a point in that fourth quarter where you thought Russ was trying to do too much?
Listen, he's been maybe the best closer in the NBA this year, and he's done a great job. I think going through the film and watching the film, I've said this before about him, he's really smart, he's bright, he's going to study and look at things and figure out, different ways to attack. And I think there's no question, coming down the stretch and even the game, or closing out the third quarter, closing out the half, there's always going to be different points and times in games over 48 minutes. You're going to look at to do things better. And I think collectively as a group, we'll have to read defense better and make those decisions. But I got an enormous amount of trust and confidence after being Russell with this season in 82 games and seeing the way he's closed out games and different things that he's done. And I trust him, when he's got the ball, in terms of making decisions. I think from this last game, just as, I think he made some significant adjustments going from game 1 to game 2, just based on the way he played and how they were guarding him. And I think he'll continue to make adjustments and get better, from game to game.
How do you balance just his minutes? I mean, because the third quarter, the third quarter took him out, was obviously a big moment. He can't play 48 minutes. So how do you balance that?
Yeah, I mean, I said this after the game. I checked with him, and he said he felt fine physically, and generally that's what Russell says, and I trust him when he says that. I mean, Russell's always straightforward and honest. I just said, as a coach after the game, sometimes you have to evaluate or look at, the amount of minutes he's on the floor consecutively. It was 12 minutes. I thought he had a rest there. But, I said this before, his minutes are going to go up in the playoffs. And I think with the way the playoff format is structured, there's more rest time. It's not a situation where, he played 41 minutes last night and we're playing again tonight on a back-to-back. We got 4 games in 5 nights. He played 34 the first night with 2 days off. Played last night 41. So if you take the first 2 games, his minutes are about where they were during the year, maybe a little bit higher. So I'm not really that worried about that with him. I do think that, in that third quarter, closing out the third quarter, we can do a better job, from an execution standpoint. That's my point. Like, you can pinpoint like a specific part of the game, and there's always going to be segments or fragments of the games where you're going to look at a pocket of it and say, geez, we could be better here. And that was probably an area at the end of the third quarter we could have been better.
Bill, you mentioned last night about your rotation. You said you wanted to look back and get a better idea watching film and that kind of stuff about certain substitution patterns you made. I was just wondering if there was anything going back and looking at it you particularly liked, you particularly didn't, that you thought worked or didn't work.
Yeah, I thought there was some things that, I liked the idea of the third quarter of going 1 through 5 and switching, at the end of the quarter to try to take away threes. And I didn't think our defense was necessarily that bad. I didn't think that we probably executed offensively, closing the third quarter like we needed to. I like sometimes when we were small and we had Doug and Kyle out there, and we were able to utilize Doug's ability to stretch the floor. And I thought Russell found him several times for some shots. I thought in that third quarter he gave us a nice little boost when they started to make a run. I liked, doing some different things with Taj from game 1 to game 2 and getting him in some areas of the floor where I thought he could be effective. There's always going to be things where it may not necessarily be the rotation, so to speak. I was really hopeful. The one thing that was, I don't want to say I was disappointed in, but if there's one area that I really thought we could have had a positive impact would have been Domas. I really felt like we had him in some situations that he could have really, really been effective. I think some of the early fouls, and he had that great drive to the basket. He may have gotten fouled in that play going down the lane. Russell found him. I thought he was close to playing really, really well for us. He had a couple of rebounds they just didn't come down with. But it wasn't like I felt like, geez, that wasn't a good rotation. So, I'm going to go back and look at it even deeper, who's out there. And then you got to look at, too, in terms of what they're doing against your rotations, sometimes they're trying to exploit different things, and it may be something that, you're feeling that they may try to exploit, they may not be trying to exploit. So I felt encouraged that we got a lot of help from a lot of different guys throughout the course of the night, which I thought was positive.
I know it's really simplistic to just kind of look at the box score and be like, oh, this guy got X amount of minutes. Why didn't he get more or fewer minutes? But at the same time, Taj's minutes have been about even, and other starters have usually gone up during the postseason. I'm wondering why Taj has been about even with his regular season minutes.
Well, again, so much of it is based on what they're doing offensively, okay? And you're going to have 2 different sets or alignments that they're going to run. There's going to be a set where they're going to have Capella and Anderson high, and there's going to have a set where they're going to have 1 low and 1 high, and that could be different. And in certain situations, playing defensively against that alignment becomes very, very critical. In some of those alignments, you have to think about switching, and you have to think about showing. When you start doing those things, you have to recognize who you're putting on specific players. When you're showing, you have to recognize who's showing and can you actually get back to a shooter. So sometimes having Jeremy in there to kind of help with the switching to eliminate some of that stuff becomes becomes something you want to do. The other part of it is if you switch with Taj, you're getting potentially into situations where Steven Adams now is coming up, and now you've got Taj and Steven Adams in pick and roll. So it's a lot more to it than just, 21 minutes. Sometimes it's who's on the floor for them, what they're running, what kind of situations, and what kind of binds are we being put into. And when we get put into a couple of those binds, can you create a situation for somebody to go out there and maybe take that bind away and force them to go to something else? Now that's what makes Houston so good offensively, is they have a lot of the things they can go to. But I don't know if I made any sense there, but that's kind of what I'm looking at as honestly as I can tell you.
Backing off of that, how difficult is it in this series to balance what you want to do offensively with what you need to do defensively?
Yeah, that's the whole thing. That's it right there. And I think there's a really fine line between throwing a player in there for 2 minutes and expecting a good performance out of somebody, and they come out after 2 minutes and they sit for 8 or 12 minutes and you throw them back in there for 2 minutes again, and you can't do that. So you want to try to create situations. And I said this before, Houston's playing 8 players, and they're going to rotate their guys, and they do Mike does a great job. I mean, they're going to have, Anderson and Capella and Ariza and Nene at the 4 and the 5. They're only rotating those 4 guys. And there's going to be either Nene and Ariza or Anderson, or it's going to be Capella with Ariza or Anderson. And then they're going to do the same thing in the backcourt, with their 4 backcourt players. So you've got to look at different situations on how you can match based on, like, their substitutions were totally different in Game 2 than they were in Game 1. In Game 1, they came right away and went small, like with about 7.5 minutes to go in the first quarter. They came right in with Lou Williams, and they came right in with Eric Gordon, and they took Anderson out, and they went small and moved Ariza to the 4. They didn't do that last night. So I think you're always trying to figure out, like, where are some good matchups for us, and how to basically utilize and take advantage of our roster. And I think that's why in some situations we did have 12 guys playing, but I did think a lot of those guys that got the opportunity did a pretty good job while they were in there. And I kind of I thought we made some positive strides in how we defended. We did a good job again in transition defense. We did a really, really good job, I thought, in trying to defend the 3. I thought our defensive rebounding was much, much more improved from where it was from Game 1. We scored 68 points in the first half. But for us, can we sustain that offensive stamina for the second half? Where we're not scoring at the same rate or shooting the ball at the same rate. That's those areas that we can get better at. And the same thing, goes defensively. We've been much better in the first half defensively. Can we sustain it in the second half as well?
I think you were kind of leading towards this, but with how important each possession is in the playoffs, is there a little bit of a do it until they stop it kind of nature on offense? I think you went to Taj in the post over and over again until they stopped it. Same thing with Doug on that kind of screen and then kick out to him. Are there things that we got to just do this until they stop it?
You may get into that a little bit. I think you also got to give the other team credit. You keep running the same exact thing, they're eventually going to say, okay, do something a little different. Now, with that being said, I felt like Taj, I've always said this before, even during the course of the year, you're always looking for offensive engines for your team where if you can get 2 on the ball. And when you can get 2 on the ball, generally there's going to be an advantage somewhere on the floor. Now the next part is, can that guy make the decision to get the ball where it needs to go? So I thought Taj posting did a really good job scoring. I also thought he did a very, very good job passing. We got some good cuts to the basket on post-ups by Andre. We had some good back cuts along the baseline by some other guys. So, Taj, I think, can be an engine for us in the series to try to post him and have him make some plays and some decisions from there.
Billy, 18 shots for Russell in the fourth quarter. A lot of people talking about that. Did you feel like enough of those shots came within the flow of the offense? It seemed like a couple times maybe some quick decisions or that maybe weren't necessarily offensive.
Yeah, I think sometimes what ends up happening is sometimes there were some switches, in fairness, where they had Capella on him, some different guys on him. They were starting to switch later in the game. I think matchup-wise for him, I kind of trust him on those switches and making those reads. I thought earlier in the game, to be quite honest, I thought that they sent 2 people to him a lot of times, and they did that in Game 1. And I think once he found Doug and found some other guys for some shots, they started to switch. They put Capella on him, they put Nene on him, they put a couple different guys. Now, once he started to go, they tried to send a crowd. And I think those are the things where that was maybe different from Game 1 to Game 2, just because the game was close coming down the stretch, that I think that he'll be able to look at and figure out, okay, here's where it's coming from, here's where rotations are coming, here's the things that we can do better, here's a better job we can do executing. I think all those things you're going to evaluate to figure out a way to improve from, Game 1 to 2 and then 2 to 3.
So they changed that even within the game itself, because like you mentioned, 68 points in the first half. I mean, offensively, you guys are flowing.
It was more. Not that they didn't do that the whole second half. They did it periodically. I think when Russell had an advantage in coming downhill, they tried to do some of that, and then I think they also tried to send some people at him as well. And like I said, he's been so great closing out games this season, and he's been so great making decisions. That, coming down the stretch, I think you're always looking, to be able to execute at a high level. And, he was very, very aggressive offensively. But like I always say this, sometimes when the ball goes in the basket, people have a tendency to say, wow, like, this was just an unbelievable performance, and is he the best closer in the game? And then when they don't come in, it's it's going to be okay. Do you take too many shots? And I think there's always a balance there. Are there some shots and some better ball movement we could have? Absolutely. Are there some shots that he took and plays that he make that I wouldn't take back? Absolutely. I think you're always looking to find that balance where we can collectively function as well as we can.
So, Coach, to be clear, late in the third, early in the fourth, you weren't as concerned with maybe effort or anything like that. You were concerned with the execution when Russ wasn't in. That was your primary concern at that time.
Well, I thought we had a couple plays. One is we got Harden stayed in the whole quarter. We got hurt on one play on a switch. We didn't switch correctly, and we gave Harden a 3 by our bench. Lou Williams got a drive, made a couple runs, had a couple drives down the lane. I thought for us, what ended up happening was we had a quick shot where we really didn't get a paint touch. Jeremy actually got the ball on a roll and made a really, I thought, a great move. And they pulled all the way off the corner, and he kind of had set up his stride to go finish, and they kind of really converged on him. He lost his balance a little bit. What was open was the corner, but I think he had committed to go up and didn't elevate like he normally does, and shot got blocked. And then I think we had a situation where we got the ball in Samaj's hands. We didn't get into offense, to be honest with you, quick enough, and we got caught settling for a tough long-range shot. And then I thought Victor kind of silenced the run there when he made a 3. But again, we were okay. We kind of righted the ship there, so to speak. I thought the one play that was one that probably impacted that third quarter was the fact we were up by 6, and we played really good defense, and Harden made a 3 to close the third quarter out of the top of us. Not that you want to lose a 12-point lead like that either, but you know what? Let's be honest. I mean, when Russell has been off the floor for us, there's been a differential. I think probably most teams you look at, when best players are off the floor, there's going to be a difference. I thought our guys did a really pretty good job. I think if we would have gone into the fourth quarter up by 6, you've been okay. And I give our guys credit from trying to, get it corrected in a short period of time. There was a stretch there of about 3 straight possessions that offense and defense weren't very good when they went on that run. If we could have had Harden maybe missed that last shot going into the fourth, you're up by 6. But we come back to the fourth, Doug makes a big 3. Next thing you know, it's back up to 8. So you're going to have, against Houston, there's going to be runs going back and forth. And I think even with us, because we fast break, there's going to be runs. And you just can't expect to, be smooth sailing for 48 minutes. And I thought our guys responded. They made some runs at us, and we responded. They made some runs, we responded. I thought we got hurt later in the game. Even to get the offense apart, we did such a good job in transition. We have 2 transition 3s late in the fourth quarter that hurt us. And we had a couple plays where we didn't have quite the rotation we needed to have. And I thought their 3s really got into the game late. They made timely and big 3s late in the game. And you got to give them credit, they made them. But for the most part, I thought we defended the 3 pretty well. But their 3s late certainly impacted us.
You ran 2 at James Harden at times last night.
Mm-hmm.
You left Anderson open for some shots.
Mm-hmm.
Was it something you saw in Game 1 that led to doing that?
Well, that's what I was trying to say a little bit earlier. Sometimes when Taj or Jeremy out there, we got caught in a couple situations where, to be honest with you, we got very, very fortunate. Anderson, I thought, he was 1 for 7 from 3, and I would say probably of the 7 threes, 5 of them were clear and clean. And I don't know if we necessarily totally impacted them as much as he just missed them. There was a couple that he did take that I thought were highly contested. We did a good job getting to him, but we got to have we had some miscommunications on some of those things that we were fortunate didn't come back and bite us.
Thanks, Coach.
Okay.